All right, second to the last week, and we have arrived at the modern era. You know, that word modern is interesting because it's self-flattering. We use it all the time. Modern as opposed to pre-modern, modern as opposed to primitive, modern as opposed to all kinds of negative ways of thinking about the people that came before us. It just reinforces our own time and our own superiority and so forth. When I use the word modern, I'm usually referring to just simply the current times. And a lot of times it has to do with technology that now that is modern when you think about pre-modern technology, which would be handwriting copies and even movable type in the 1400s, which we're going to talk about again today. But we now have what is called it is often called the modern critical text. And the modern critical text of the New Testament is a reconstructed Greek text based on the expanse of the manuscript tradition of manual copies of the original writings, none of which do we have. They disappeared long ago because they were written on papyrus, and that stuff doesn't last. And so what we're going to do today is compare, well, several things. We're going to compare the manuscript tradition for the New Testament to the manuscripts available for other ancient writings, other important ancient writings, some of which are well, the fancy word is contemporaneous. What's a shorter word? At the same time as the New Testament writings. And we're also going to look at, I turns out I was wrong. I was thinking about it this week, and I didn't have it right regarding, I made the statement, I made two statements that were wrong in the last feed. The first was that once we had a Bible rolling off the printing press, movable type, in the early 1500s, the text became static. And there was an assumption behind what I said that I want to revisit because it was wrong, and it was wrong in an important way. And the second thing is I called Westcott and Hort's text of the Greek New Testament. I said they called it the New Testament in the original language. That's wrong. It's the New Testament in the original Greek, if you care about being accurate, which I do. So anyway, let's begin with this movable type problem. What problem did movable type solve? And what remained?
It solved the copy. You copy it by hand, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes.
We'll get back to that. We'll talk about what problem did movable type really solve and what was left to be solved. That's the question. And the reason it matters is because there's still a strain of modern biblical, it's a small strain, I think, modern biblical scholarship, which is on the quest for certainty. Unless you can be certain, this is a post-enlightenment modern thing, unless you can be certain of something, meaning 100%, almost like a deductive proof, like math, well, you know, they have a proof that 1 + 1 = 2, which excludes all other possibilities. There's this modern, there's a deductive, what do they call that? I forget that. Mathematical proof for 1 + 1 = 2, which excludes all other possibilities. And so there's this modern quest for certainty, like mathematical certainty, that unless you satisfy, you don't, your belief in something is compromised. That you should only believe in that of which you are certain. And they're never going to say it, but it creeps into the argument, and you can hear this argument for certainty. If somebody says, well, you don't know that, you say something. The person responds, well, you don't know that. What do they really mean? Usually what they mean is, you can't be 100% certain of that. And so when you fall into that trap of the quest for certainty, you end up in this thoroughgoing agnosticism. If somebody says that to me, you can't, you don't know that. I'm gonna ask, what do you mean by no? Do you mean I can't be certain? Yes. Okay. Then we can't believe in almost anything. There's, if you're talking about a mathematical proof, how many things are there mathematical proofs for? Somebody tell me the mathematical proof for your belief that right now in this room, that Poland is a real country in Europe, that Mars is a real planet, that the nearest star is Proxima Centauri, 4.25 light years away, that the sun is 93 million miles away, that the moon exists. Do you have mathematical certainty? No, you have so much evidence for it that it's not debatable. That's what you have. But but certainty is a fool's errand. That's how I think of it. It's the unicorn. It's the pursuit of the unicorn. And we don't do that sort of thing. And so that sort of quest for certainty has made its way into the analysis of what the original text is, because we don't have the original text. And so the question is, can we be certain that we have what was originally written? Depends on what you mean by certain. Because by their definition of certain, if you mean mathematical certain, excluding the possibility of error, no. Who cares? Are you going to base your belief on the quest for certainty? If so, don't bother believing in anything. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, because that's crept into the discussion of the New Testament manuscript tradition. That's why we want to talk about, that's the importance of talking about the other ancient writings and what we have. So let's talk about, which one do we want to do first? Let's do the, my mistake with the movable type. So here's a timeline. I love timelines, in case you haven't noticed. I did start the recording, didn't I? All right. Let's take a look at this timeline. I added a few things to it. You have a previous copy of it in black and white, in black print, white background. I added a couple things to it. What was the mistake that I made with the invention of movable type when I said it made the text static? It locked, the phrase I used is it locked the text of the New Testament in stone. Well, here's the problem with that. What?
Still have
We'll get there. What Brian was getting at is the issue. And the problem with movable type is he had to take those letters, little metal letters, look at the manuscript that was handed to him from wherever he got it, in this case Erasmus, create the font. The font is the set of letters, which I think took 2 years or some ridiculous amount of time. And then one by one, put those letters down, looking at the text. Or maybe more than one person probably did it. One by one, essentially using this collection of puzzle pieces of letters, copy the New Testament from his handwritten copy to the font. That's a copy. That's a copy. It does not solve that problem. All he did was make a very, very elaborate copy that was subject to almost every what's called transcriptional scribal error that could be made. Misspellings, missed words, missed letters. He's tired. By next week, hopefully, I will have run Karen's copy of Matthew, which she copied by hand, through AI and give an analysis of how she did. Oh, you're not? Well, you can listen to it. You can.
If I don't, I'll make one.
No, you can listen to it online as well. So that's the issue with That's the issue with movable type. It did not solve that problem. The problem that it solved was once you have that, mass production. That's what you can do. You can now disseminate the text in a mass fashion instead of by additional copying. You can now publish the manuscript. Publishing came into being. I'm making this up as I go along. Publishing came into being with movable type, putting them letters on whatever that machine was. However he did that over a 2-year period. You think he failed the first time? Something happened and he had to do the whole thing over again. Just remember, this is the copy of the Latin Vulgate that came off the Gutenberg press. He did it at least twice, may have been 3 times. And everybody's in a hurry because somebody else might do it. That's what Erasmus was up against. The Spanish were looking to produce a Greek text of the New Testament. It ended up being called the something polyglot, the word that begins with this, I can't remember the word. They published theirs in 1620, and that was going to put the pressure on Erasmus to get his text out by his publisher. They wanted the text. So he got his out 1516, I think, and that came off the Gutenberg press. But after the movable type was set. So that's the problem that publishing was born. That's the thing that movable type, which is a ginormous accomplishment in and of itself. So now let's take a look at this diagram, which you've seen before. You have. I added some things, moved some things around. We still have the Nestle text out here. The beginning of the modern critical text, which was based on Tischendorf, Westcott and Hort, and who's the third one? Weymouth, right there in front of me. Those 3 texts. Where 2 agreed, he took it. Where he couldn't get agreement on any of the 3 in a verse or something, I don't know what he did. He did the best he could. But he had a method. He described it. He put out a text. What I have here is the 28th edition of that work. Your English translation is almost certainly made from either the 26th or the 27th edition of this Greek text. We'll talk about the differences. But anyway, there's a couple of new points of data on this thing. Remember, movable type solved the publishing problem. We want to make money. We want to sell this book to however many thousands of people. Well, it'll take decades and hundreds of years to make thousands of copies of this thing. We're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to set it up on movable type and then run it one after another. So it's an extraordinary time technologically. I don't know where you would say the modern era of technology was born, but man, this was a big one. This was transformative because what's coming later, for example, is Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, probably the most important math text there is, but same deal. How did he do that? He wrote it down and then he gave it to someone who did something like this. What else is he going to do? Plus all those other books, Great Enlightenment, John Locke, all these writers, Immanuel Kant, Rene Descartes, Francis Bacon, Kepler, Copernicus, one after another. And including that KJV right there, 1769, movable type. So once again, when you talk about KJV, only inerrant New Testament or Bible, happens again. Got to take that text, somebody has to write it, got to move it to movable type. Errors. Oh, so that's what happened right after the 1611 version. There were 3 versions in the 30s, 1630s, I think. Well, what were they doing? Well, once you put out your text, once you publish your text, you discover misspellings and so forth. So you do another revision.
You mean like you did your, mistake? on,
Yes. Exactly. Thank you. You're free to point out my mistake anytime.
I was just trying to make a point. that-
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exact. I revisit this stuff all the time. And then I listen to the feed and I made mistakes, so I hopefully correct them. Sometimes they're factual mistakes and sometimes they're just careless, not thinking. But anyway, so there were a few revisions of that KJV 1611, pretty quick. That often happens. There'll be several revisions pretty close to the original because now people start digesting it and they start sifting through and they find the mistakes. And then they correct it, put out a new revision. Sometimes in the modern era, there's reprintings because they run out of them, but they'll do a revision. They find enough things in there, they do another printing to fix the mistakes. But you'll read books today, I have, and you'll find mistakes, misspelled words, left out words, grammatical errors, and so forth. You get enough of those to accumulate, maybe it's time for a new revision. So what are we waiting for? When can we lock in stone? When can we have something off the hand of the original writer that can be, without any intermediary, printed? When do you know? Well, that's going to be a couple of major accomplishments. Again, technology. The first is going to come in 1867 with the invention of the typewriter. Well, now the writer isn't writing, he's typing. So he has a formal print edition. So that letter, he writes that letter. Which letter is that? It's hard to tell. That happens a lot in the old manuscripts. I mean, we can't tell. I'll give you a good example. I already quoted it. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God. The we have part of we have peace. The difference between ekdamen, Omicron, we have, and ekdomen, omega, let us have, is the difference between that Omicron and that omega. Omicron, omega. Well, you get a little careless with how you write that, and the next scribe, he can't tell that he makes the mistake. He reads omega instead of Omicron, and suddenly something went from the indicative, we have, to an imperative, a command, let us have. Or the scribe, the copy, you're in a scriptorium where you have a bunch of scribes, and you have a master in the front of the room who's reading the text. So now we're getting, I know it's a 4th century version or 3rd century, it's called a 4th century version of publishing. Well, we don't want to copy them hand by hand by hand by hand, one at a time. We'll put a whole bunch of scribes in the same room. We'll put a whole bunch of scribes in the same room, and we'll just read the text, and they'll all copy. So when a scribe says ekomen, the master, the slave, so to speak, one or two of them might hear ekomen as opposed to ekomen. So it makes its way into the manuscript tradition. So now the guy after the one who put ekomen, he gets his, well, he just sees ekomen. He's not going to think, well, I think it should be ekomen. That's not what he's doing. He's saying, well, he's just writing the words. And ekomen, let us have peace with God. If your text had always said that, you would believe that's what it said. You wouldn't look at it and go, that doesn't make any sense. You'd go, yeah, that makes sense. Let us have peace with God. So you'd go with it. So these are the kinds of things that happen. Anyway, with now the typewriter, you have a print form where the letters are standard. But what you still need, you're halfway there. What you still need is a way to run those things directly from that print off of his hand with no intermediary and spit out a bunch of copies, spit out the pages like a copy machine, right? And nobody thinks about the magic of the copy machine. It's unbelievable, right? I can go from my word processor, Word, print it out, bring it into the church, put it on a copy machine and produce 50 copies. It's amazing. It's a miracle. It's what a blessing for the Word of God. So anyway, 1907 or so, we have our first photostatic copy. Now we're talking. Now we can just pump out those copies one after another. And so we can now move from the exemplar, the original writing, where there's no doubt about that letter, to publishing, mass publishing of exactly that.
What was the first static copy seem like?
I don't know. I didn't get enough. I just thought of this morning. Everything I just told you, I thought about this morning. So by next week, who the heck knows what I'm going to be thinking? You know,
You have to make a new copy.
I know. Yep. It just occurred. I was thinking about the movable type and I went, wait a minute. As I'm listening to the feed, I'm going, that didn't lock it in stone. The original, that locked in stone what he put on the movable, what he put for movable type. The typeset, whatever they call that. That's what got locked in stone. But he could have been a crazy man. He could have decided, I don't like what Erasmus did here. I'm an expert at Greek. I don't like what Erasmus wrote. I'm going to change it. And they're not going to notice. And so I'm going to publish this. And then, 3 revisions later, which happened, Erasmus's, I don't remember when Erasmus's latest edition was, but then his edition was going to be taken over by a man by the name of Stephanus, who would produce a revision of Erasmus's text. And then there was one after that. I don't remember what that was. But then those texts are actually going to be the ones that are going to be used by the King James translators, along with the Bishop's Bible, which was
First photostat had the black background with white printer.
Oh, it did?
Camera that took pictures without a negative.
That's another miracle of modern technology. Your picture, film, which is archaic. That's how fast things are moving. It's archaic. When I tell you that I took tens of thousands of pictures in the 90s when I was on staff with Campus Crusade, 36 on a roll, you run out of 36, you grab another cartridge at quite a bit of money.
What's a cartridge?
You put that in the thing, you pull it across, there's the film, put it on the other side, close the back, click, click, you run out. Now you're thinking, oh boy, I've only got 8 pictures left and I got this event and I don't want to run out of pictures, so I got to be careful about how many more I use. All gone, right? All gone. As my sister-in-law said, who's basically a professional photographer, that was her degree in college. Everybody's a professional now because the technology is there. Okay. So this photostatic copy then, if you're talking about the development of publishing and being able to run a New Testament off and mass produce a New Testament off an assembly line from the exemplar, from the original, with no intermediary into your hands. It doesn't happen until the 1900s. That's when it happens. It's expensive. The equipment takes time to make its way around the world. So not everybody has access to it. So think about, for example, when they ran the New York Times off the printing press in go back and look at a story in the New York Times about the sinking of the Titanic. And think about what went into, they do this every single day, that newspaper. It's an unbelievable operation when you think about it. All of it getting it just, it's, man.
Setting the type.
Yeah, all of it. Yep. And then if they learn more. They put out a morning edition and an evening edition. They put out the morning edition, they get more information. So they update it in the evening edition. All the work that goes into that, morning and evening. It's unbelievable. Okay, anyway. So this is, as far as I could get this morning, now you can project forward from the photostatic copy. There's a dry, what was it? It was there's a dry, it's Xerox. Xerox became the next great innovation, I think. And I can only infer from the word dry what they mean by that ink. But when you run a copy off of, like I did this morning, when I run a copy out of my printer, I think nothing of it. I just pick up the thing like this and walk away with it. It's dry. Somebody had to figure that out. How to have something dry within, basically from the moment it's put on the page. Then you move forward into the computer era and you'll have word processing because typewriters are expensive. You got, remember the Solex? Was it the Solex, that innovation in typewriters where you have the one single cartridge? Selectric, that's what Solex.
I mean,
The Selectric typewriter. We had to take a class when I was in high school, 9th grade. We took a class, typing class. And I remember when that Selectric typewriter came, that was a big deal because before you had all these keys, like piano keys, like, and these keys would do this, typing on the page.
and piano players usually did better in typing class.
Unbelievable. And then the Selectric came where it was a single movable ball and you typed a letter and it would turn to the letter that you're typing. So that's 50 years ago. That's only in the last 50 years. It's unbelievable. Now we're into what we're into. These things here. For correction typing.
Yeah.
I keep trying to type a word and it keeps wanting to correct it to some other word. Just stop. Hey, technology, I appreciate it. You're amazing. You're doing too much.
When I was in 10th grade and I had that bad car accident, I was in typing class at that time. That was the one class that the homebound teacher could not work on me when I was out of school. And so when I came back, I had to go to my study hall and go to typing class 2 hours a day. And I remember being taught on a manual typewriter. And then everything you're buying now is electric typewriter, and that's a big change.
So,
I learned on a typewriter that was in World War II.
yeah, I remember them. Not quite that old, but. Okay. So I wanted to get that out. Why do I want to get that out? Which takes us to I didn't get a chance to do the diagram. I might do this, a timeline on this, but the steps that I'm talking about, if you want to really talk about setting the text in stone from the exemplar, from the hand of the author, you go from movable type in 1450-ish to the typewriter in 1867 to photostatic reproduction, 1907 about. Then in the 20th century, later, you're going to get into digital manuscripts. So we're going to talk about the text of this text here. How do they reproduce this? Well, you have to go look at the manuscript. You have to go to England, and if it's 1900, you're going on a boat, get access to the manuscript, look at it. This is what Tischendorf did. Copy, look at it, copy. That's what you were doing. So now what you can do, they're now digitizing these manuscripts. So you can go online and you can look at Sinaiticus. The entire codex. Sure. The entire codex is on here somewhere. I think. You miss it? Doesn't matter. You can just go look at any text you want. If you're a text scholar and you want to do a PhD dissertation on some verse, you can go online You ain't taking no boat to England, to the library. You go online and you can look at the text and do your work. Okay, get going. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more next week, but I want to move on and make sure that I get done. I don't want to have what happened in the spring, which was I was a week off and had to rush to finish. Okay, why does this matter to me? And the reason it matters to me is the modern quest for certainty has kind of crept back in because of one particular tradition of scholarship that originated in the 90s. It's got one name attached to it. The name doesn't matter. But the argument is something like, well, if God wanted us to have the text that was originally written, he wouldn't have had scribes make so many errors. That's the quest for certainty. As if because the scribes made scribal errors, the text, the knowledge is compromised. We can't know what was written. Almost no, the vast majority of New Testament scholars do not believe that, whether they're Christians or not. What they question is not whether we have what Paul wrote in Romans. We'll just take a minute. The question is not whether we have what Mark wrote. The question is who really wrote it and whether any of that stuff really happened. That becomes the question, which are different questions. And so I have no respect for this attempt to undermine biblical authority through the avenue of the doubt about textual criticism, about being able to recover the text. And so they'll talk about it, you know, the compromise of the text through scribal errors. And so then you call them out on it. Well, you're acting like we can't recover what was originally written. And then eventually you're going to hear something about, well, we can't be certain. And as soon as you hear that magic word certain, I just dismiss. All right, you're on the quest for certainty. You're making a certainty argument. And I don't care about certainty arguments. Give me your belief. I want to attack your stupid belief. So you tell me your stupid belief, so I can attack that one. Because right now you're just sitting on a mountain. You're sitting on a hill throwing stones down at the rest of it. So come on down to the rest of us. Get in the arena. Tell us what you think, what you believe in, what you have convictions about. So I can throw rocks at that. Because I can throw rocks. You know. That was harsh. I don't care. I'm gonna die soon. Doesn't matter. Sorry, that was over the top. Yeah.
Can you comment on the oldest manuscript compared with today's digital manuscript?
The oldest manuscripts have been digitized.
I understand that, but what I want to say, the oldest manuscripts compared with the newer manuscripts, how accurate are they?
You have, well, let's pick two entirely different manuscript traditions. Actually, well, let's keep going. Yeah, let's talk about the Nestle text. That's exactly the question. The Nestle text, edition number 1. At the time, it wasn't edition number 1. It was just Nestle text. It's kind of like a movie that's whatever it is, Alien or something. Well, you don't have the sequel in mind where you're going to put Alien 1. And then when Aliens comes out, you know, as if you're, you know, you saw, I mean, I guess sometimes Back to the Future had a Back to the Future 2 and 3, but you just make Back to the Future. And it's the same thing here. You have the Nestle text. He puts this text out. And so there were, what edition was it? 21 editions later, 20 editions later, his text was basically the, what's the word when you put three, what's the word begins with an S, the word when you combine things together? Synthesis of these three right here. Tischendorf, Westcott and Hort, the devil, depending on what you believe about the King James Version. And then Weymouth. Now you have the Nestle text. So he did not go back to the sources, so to speak, that Renaissance thing, because somebody already went back to the sources for him. So he used what they gave him. Tischendorf, Westcott and Hort, and Weymouth produced their own Greek texts from what they considered the original, or as close as they could get to the original. So he produces a text based on their work on old manuscripts, primarily Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, 5th century, mid-5th century, or even earlier codices, books, big ones. Now it's going to go through revisions, and it's going to go through 20 of them, but not based on the oldest manuscripts, based on this, based on what they already had. Those early editions, or they're not even early, those 20 editions are going to be based on the previous Nestle's. Then in 1952, a man by the name of a German, Kurt Aland, A-L-A-N-D, one of the most important New Testament scholars of the 20 ever, period, joins the Nestle team, so to speak. And in 1952, after he joins, he's not running it yet, they produce the 21st edition. That's the first edition he works on. Still working from the prior editions of the Nestle text. Tischendorf, Westcott and Hort, Weymouth. In, I think, 1963, he becomes the main guy, and we're now going to move to the Nestle Aland or Aland text. It used to be the Nestle text with the 25th edition. 63, yeah, the 25th edition becomes the Nestle Aland text, I think. I'm not positive on that. He takes it over. It's still in the same tradition. Tischendorf, Westcott and Hort, Weymouth, what Nestle did, he's building on the prior work until, that's how long it takes to do this stuff, the 26th edition in 1979, when, for the first time, they do a complete revision from the manuscripts themselves, taking everything into account. So they're still going to use Sinaiticus and Vaticanus heavily. So it will be no surprise then that the 26th edition looks an awful lot like the 25th edition. And so a translation into English off the 26th edition, which would be the I don't know, NASB 95. You can read NASB
84, NASB 84.
You can look at the NASB 95 and the NASB 71. Compare the two, see how different they are. Off of a text, a Nestle text, that's Tischendorf, Weymouth, and Westcott and Hort, versus a Nestle Aland text, the 26th edition, which is based on right straight back to the earliest manuscripts and collating them together and making your own decision. You can look at those two English translations and see how different they are. They're not. I frankly prefer the 71 edition, but I can't find a print copy of it.
Why do you prefer the 71?
I like the English. I think the English is, I just like the English. It's a little bit older English.
So you still like the these now that they.
They do that some, but plus I many more passages do I have committed to memory. So like when I read it, you'll hear me do it all the time. I'll read it wrong when I'm looking at the English Standard Version, because even though I have it in front of me, because I remember the
I do the same thing.
NASB 71. Okay, so that takes us to 1979. Most translations that would also include the ESV 2001 almost certainly came off the 26th edition. So there would have been a generation after the 79 edition, after the 26th edition, the English translations would have used that, and that's where you would see the English translations transition over to, and be reason to do revisions like the NASB 95 based on the modern Greek text. Even if the modern Greek text looks an awful lot like the old Greek text. But it was 1970, that's how late it was, 1979. We are now onto the 28th edition. I believe the 27th looks text-wise is exactly the same as 26. They made a lot of discoveries about that. 26 looks an awful lot like 25. 25 looks an awful lot like 1. But 27 and 26 are identical in text. 28th edition, they began to use digital resources. With modern technology now, you get access to online resources, digital copies, and so forth. That edition came out in 2012. And so my hunch is, more than just mine, you're going to see a 29th edition. They're working on a 29th edition, which will use AI
That part is.
to create text. And it'll be very interesting to see how close an AI generated text is to what the humans generated. But that's a whole different, that's false that AI hasn't, you can say, well, AI is unbiased. Oh, no. Absolutely not. AI is entirely biased. All depends on the rules they put in place, the political and social cultural philosophy of the people who created those algorithms. They all have opinions about all of this stuff that's going on in the world. You ask a question a certain way, you know, they'll throw things in there. You go, I didn't ask you about that. What's that doing in there? Why are you talking about the Holocaust right now? I didn't ask you about the Holocaust. You know, for example.
In terms of proving originality, original hard copies are very important because digital can be changed.
Digital can be changed, but people archive all that stuff and they notice. You actually see this on Twitter, where somebody put something out on Twitter 10 years ago, and that thing they put out is suddenly immoral. In 2021 or 26, it's suddenly immoral because somebody decided in the world that it's immoral to believe that. And even though the person who put the first thing out 10 years ago believes the same thing, believes the new morality, that's what I call it, that's the morality of the current year. What is the world's morality? It's the morality of the current year, and it's going to change next year. It's going to be something different, which is why people's beliefs are changing so fast. Just go with the world. But anyway, they'll go back and try to scrub their previous digital footprint. Uh-oh, the morality changed. Now there's 39 genders. And I posted that thing that there's only 2. So they go back and they delete it. But other people are already onto this, so they went and archived that. So now you delete it, and then all you did was call attention to it. Politicians will do this. They'll delete these posts, and then, you know, the watchers have already archived it. They go, nah, this is what it was. You know, they put this out 10 years ago. They're holding on to it for when this person says, so, yeah, but 10 years ago, you believe this, you know. Anyway, digital footprint doesn't go away. You have the previous revisions.
You know, I was watching just a little snippet of a court case. I don't remember who it was against this week on Fox News, and there's a expert witness giving testimony based on deleted emails. And so the typical thing was, you know, most days for this particular business, they would delete about maybe 300 emails. On this day, there were thousands of deleted emails, which caused a red flag.
There was a former presidential candidate who got caught up in exactly that. 34,000 disappeared emails, which is a felony, which is more than one felony. But that's the point. You give me the hard drive, says the professionals. I don't care if they deleted it or not. I'll get them back for you. Never goes away. Just assume it never goes away.
Take one word, gay.
Yep.
Back in the 1950s, it meant you were happy. It meant you were glad. It meant all that.
Yeah, there's lots of words.
Word now, you can get
Yeah.
thrown in jail.
Lots of words, well, not for using the word, but for making fun of it, I guess would be. Yeah, evolution of language, words change meaning.
And that's my reason for liking a more updated version of scriptures. Because the language used in 1611, most of us have a different understanding of what those words mean. I've seen so many people delve into bad doctrine based on put modern day usage of words into something that was written in 1601.
So this is, speaking of the manuscript tradition and the quest for certainty, and the lapse into thoroughgoing historical agnosticism, we really can't know what happened in the past because we can't trust the writings, because who knows what they really wrote. And even if we had what they really wrote, they were very biased and they were prejudiced, so who, almost everything we know about the early church comes off the hand of a 4th century person named Eusebius, a bishop. Caesarea? I don't remember. Eusebius. He's one of the most important ancient personalities you've never heard of, because he's like Josephus. Almost everything we know about early Judaism and what happened in the 1st century with the Jewish war and so forth, and the destruction of the temple, comes off of out of Josephus' head. Josephus had an axe to grind. He was in the mode of self-protection. So you can say, well, he's so biased that, and my response is, that what? You can't trust anything he said? You're going to throw it all away? And there's people that would say that. My response is, all right, let's take a look. So here's some of the most important ancient manuscripts or writings that we still have today.
Have you given us a copy of that yet?
Yeah, it's out there somewhere. I can make more. And you can see the one there, Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, which is making the rounds right now. What are the Greeks so offended about right now? Well, the reason they're offended is their perception that they've erased that the director compromised the original work with some of his choices in making the film that he made, the Odyssey. And so there's an outcry about it. Are they thinking, well, we don't know what Homer wrote in the Odyssey because we have only, 450 manuscripts, and the earliest one is 400 years after it was originally written? No, nobody's saying that. These people cared about these writings. That's why they copy them. That's why they pass them down generation after generation orally, even if they're not writing them, for hundreds of years. Exactly the same thing with biblical writing, particularly with the Old Testament and the New Testament. The first gospel, in my view, wasn't written, wasn't put to paper or papyrus until the 60s. That's 30 years after the events. As much as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that had been accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us, handed down how, it seemed fitting for me, most excellent Theophilus, to write them out in consecutive order so that you can know the certainty, kind of is the word he uses there, about the things which you believe. Were they written sources, or he talks to some guy and gets this, like Peter, he gets the story. Maybe more than one. That's certainly both. Some written. I'll tell you this, almost everyone, and you have some of the scholarship world, believes that Matthew and Luke used Mark. So Matthew and Luke had a source, and that was Mark. But anyway, so here's kind of a comparison. The point being, you can look through here and see Plato's Republic, 210 manuscripts left, not full manuscripts. So that's why I put this here. Earliest complete manuscript, 800s. Think about that. Almost 1,400 years later. Almost 1,400 years later. People study Plato. They live their lives after Plato, following his teachings. They're that confident that. Are we certain that we have what Plato wrote? No, and I don't care.
But nobody argues it.
Nobody argues it. Euclid, mathematician, Euclidean, Archimedes, same thing. These are towering giants in the world of mathematics and science, other realms of science. Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars, shortly before Christ, where his exploits, and he was magnificent in battle in Gaul. And if you don't believe me, just ask him in this writing. He wrote this thing in the third person, Caesar. He called it not me, it's Caesar, Caesar, Caesar. Then he comes back to Rome, takes over Rome. That's the Roman Civil War. And then he gets assassinated by the 26 assassins that all hacked him to death and each other in a frantic attempt to make sure this man didn't rise from the ashes. Because you do not want to attempt to kill Julius Caesar and fail. So anyway, by the way, they have that location, they think, where he was assassinated. Josephus, extremely important. We know a lot about the destruction of the temple. There's a hour-long video on YouTube covering the Jewish war. I can give you a link. We actually watched it when I did Acts in Sunday school class. We watched it, and it's fantastic. About the 4 Roman legions laying siege to Jerusalem and then the Temple Mount. And everything we know about that event and the aftermath comes from Josephus, I think. So we have, that was 79. He wrote in 70. He wrote post-Christ, the second half of the 1st century. Earliest surviving manuscript, you see it there, total of less than 10. Josephus is used all over the place in universities everywhere. He was a Jewish writer. Tacitus, Annals of Imperial Rome. I don't know why the New Testament is down there. Why did I do that? Oh, date. I did it by date. Tacitus, Roman historian, wrote, I think it's a 10-volume, 12-volume set. We don't have all of it, but you can see the time lapse here, right? It's 800 years. Time between 700 and some odd years between the earliest, when it was written and the earliest complete copy, when he lived to the first. 33 surviving manuscripts. Then there's the New Testament. Why does it matter? It matters because if you're going to say, well, we don't know what was written because these manuscripts disagree with each other so much and they were so far after the originals and the scribes were biased, my response is then throw it all away. Or would you rather have the situation with Plato where you don't have any manuscripts? If there were 6,000 manuscripts of Plato's Republic, do you think they'd all agree? It would look like the New Testament. That's exactly what it would look like. And that would be fine. I hope they do discover 5,000 manuscripts of Plato.
What catches my eye is the time lapse, the time gap.
Time gap,
Much
yeah.
Smaller than.
Take a look there. New Testament, all the books written by the 90s. Yeah, in the modern era, you think that 60 years, 30-something to 90-something, 60 years, is a long time. Take a look. It's nothing. It's unbelievable how close we have writing. And remember, we also have a fragment, remember, of John 31, 18, 31 through 33, and 37 and 38, within a generation of John's gospel written in there's nothing like that out there. Nothing even remotely close. So there's the difference. Homer and Euclid, you got big numbers, but they're 5 times less than the New Testament. Complete manuscripts, I'll just close with this. Complete manuscript, 300s, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, or not Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, after 331 at some point, 270 years later. Look at the rest of these numbers in the comparison. Unbelievable. We can talk more about this next week, but I want to wrap things up. So we'll go ahead and stop there. The reason that I put this up is to address this issue of historical agnosticism. Unless you have the original, You know, these scribes make so many mistakes. Unless you have the original, you can't reproduce the original. So you just have no, you don't have, you undermine the belief by undermining the tradition that it comes from, by undermining the scribes who made the copies. That train of criticism I dismiss, because it leads to thorough historical skepticism and agnosticism where you really can't believe in any. We don't have the original Gettysburg Address. 1860 or 61. I don't remember when that was. Probably 61. Abraham Lincoln. We have 5 copies, which differ. Which somebody took one of them and put them on movable type and did the thing. So what's the argument? All right, we got to stop. Plus, I've been yelling. At least I feel like I've been yelling. Yeah.
Very, because I had a young man last week in my house doing some painting. So I asked him if he went to church anywhere, and he said, no, I don't believe in church. He says, and I don't want to argue about it either. I don't want to discuss it. And I said, well, okay. He says, I'll just tell you one thing. The Bible has had so many translations. It's been changed so many times. How do you expect me to believe that now?
I would go here.
And then I told him about my class. He says, but I don't want to talk about it. So,
Yeah, he doesn't really have a problem with that. He said it right there. He doesn't want to, people just don't want to come to grips with the implications of believing this stuff.
I said, but he has 3 girls that he's raising by himself. I said, but girls need to have something. And he said, they need to know that there's a God they have to account to one of these days. And he said, no, I tell them if they get in trouble, I will beat their, I won't say the word he said. He says, they know that I'll beat their if they get in trouble. Well, there you go.
Till there. I mean, there's lots of issues there. I'd probably go to. Yeah.
He won't even talk about it because his mind's made up and he won't discuss it.
Yeah, and that's most of the world doesn't believe. And they don't believe for a reason. That, you know, for many reasons. And many of those reasons are perfectly appropriate to talk about. But this one here is dismissed relatively quickly. Anyway, I got to shut down.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome. See you, Nate, Naomi, Gabe, Stacy, Kay.